My name is Sienna Witt, and the day my mother clapped while my sister humiliated me, something inside our family finally broke loud enough for everyone to hear. Some betrayals happen in private. A whispered lie. A forged signature. Money moved quietly from one account to another. But some betrayals need an audience. They need folding chairs on a lawn, paper plates balanced on knees, relatives pretending not to stare, and sunlight bright enough to make cruelty look festive. Last Memorial Day, my younger sister stood at the head of the picnic table, lifted a glass of white wine, smiled the smile she used when she wanted witnesses, and called me a desperate woman who never outgrew being broke. 25 relatives laughed, because laughter is cheaper than courage. My mother laughed the hardest. Then she clapped. 3 quick strikes of palm against palm, proud as if she had raised wit instead of meanness. I stood there with a paper plate in one hand and a glass of water in the other. I could feel 25 sets of eyes waiting to see whether I would cry, argue, defend myself, or shrink back into the role my family had assigned me years ago: useful daughter, overlooked daughter, dependable daughter, daughter-shaped furniture. Instead, I raised my glass. I answered her toast in 11 words. And 25 people forgot how to swallow. But that moment did not begin on Memorial Day. It began 6 months earlier at exactly 7:42 in the morning, when my phone lit up with a notification I almost ignored and a brown folder became heavier than paper had any right to be. Because when my family finally looked inside that folder, 3 of them cried. None of them was me. If you've ever held the truth quietly while people mistook your silence for weakness, stay with me. This story is for you. Memorial Day began at 6 in the morning with potato salad. That sounds too small for a war story, but most family wars begin with ordinary things. A casserole, a seating chart, a birthday cake, who got thanked first and who got invited last. Ours began years before, but that morning it wore the smell of boiled potatoes and dill. The kitchen radio was already on when I came downstairs. Oldies station. Something thin and warm from 1962. My grandmother used to keep the radio low while cooking, saying music should season a room, not dominate it. I had boiled the potatoes the night before. Chopped celery the night before. Measure mayonnaise into a glass bowl and cover it with wax paper the night before. And the night before, after rinsing the knife and drying my hands, I had slid a thick brown folder into the bottom compartment of my canvas tote bag and zipped it shut. I didn't open it that morning. I had already checked it twice that week. Every page was where it belonged. Every signature copied. Every statement is highlighted. Every lie dated. The lake wind drifted through the window over the sink, carrying pine, damp wood, and early warmth. Vermont in late May can still surprise you with kindness. I stirred the potatoes carefully. Added salt. Added pepper. Added dill last, because grandmother always said herbs bruise when rushed. I packed the bowl into a cooler with ice packs. Then I placed a smaller envelope on top of the folder. My Aunt Marina's name was written across it in pencil. The envelope was thin. Some truths need only 1 page. I did not wear makeup. I wore the navy cotton dress I had ironed on Friday night. 14 years earlier, my mother had looked me over before church and said, "Navy makes you look like a bank teller." I remembered it because daughters remember what mothers think they'll forget. I bought the dress anyway. At 6:40, I checked the hallway mirror, picked up my keys, and left. A pair of mourning doves had built a nest above my porch light. They watched me lock the door and carry the cooler to the car. The tote bag went in the passenger seat. When it touched the leather, the folder inside made a stiff sound. I had my potato salad. I had my folder. I was ready in a language my family did not speak yet. My parents' lake house had belonged to the family since the 1970s. Cedar siding. Green shutters. The dock is repaired every other summer. The sort of place people call modest while using it for 3 generations of emotional damage. There were already 11 cars in the gravel turnaround when I arrived. By noon, there would be 25 people, give or take a cousin. Memorial Day attendance had always been treated less like an invitation and more like military duty. I parked near the boathouse at the far end of the drive. I had learned years ago to park where I could leave without asking anyone to move. My mother noticed Tessa before she noticed me. I saw it happen from across the gravel. My younger sister stepped out of a white Mercedes wearing white linen, white sunglasses, white sandals, like vanity had chosen a theme. My mother actually hurried toward her, knee replacement and all, arms open. "There's my star," she called. I stood 10 yards away holding a cooler. My father sat on the porch with a beer he had opened too early. He nodded at me. He did not stand. My father's affection had always arrived in abbreviations. Tessa's husband, Brett, came around the passenger side and opened the trunk. He always moved half a step behind her, like a man who had mistaken loyalty for disappearance. I carried my cooler toward the kitchen. Aunt Marina stood by the porch steps, reorganizing drink cans no one had asked her to organize. Marina believed in giving her hands a task when her mind was busy. She glanced at my tote bag. "Did you bring it?" she asked. I nodded. She touched my forearm for 1 second. "Good." Then she went back to the cans. Families like mine run on unofficial roles. My mother was the queen of appearances. My father was king of silence. Tessa was the golden child, favored because she reflected my mother's vanity back at her like a mirror. I was utility. Need someone to arrive early? Call Sienna. Need someone to bring food? Ask Sienna. Need someone to clean up after everyone leaves? Sienna's still here. Useful people are often mistaken for unimportant people. By 10:15, Tessa was telling the Tuscany story. Again. "I just took Mom and Dad to Tuscany because they deserved a break," she said loudly to anyone within hearing distance. I told Brett, "Parents come first." Relatives made admiring noises. The truth was less cinematic. My parents had paid for the trip themselves. Tessa had simply booked it on my mother's debit card after helping with online travel arrangements. I knew because 6 weeks earlier, Phyllis Crane had shown me the statements. I said nothing. I had stopped correcting Tessa publicly around age 30. Some lies survive on oxygen. At 10:22, my phone vibrated against my hip. I stepped behind the porch screen and checked it. Fraud alert. Trust fee account. Unusual withdrawal request approved. $4,200. My grandmother's trust. The secondary retirement reserve my grandparents left for my parents. The account I managed administratively for 10 years under a succession clause that no one in my immediate family fully understood. I opened the details. Authorized by power of attorney, Tessa Witt Merrick. My stomach went cold. This was the 14th flagged withdrawal in 18 months. 14th. I locked the screen and slid the phone back into my pocket. Outside, someone had connected a speaker to jazz no one loved. Children chased each other around the folding chairs. My mother posed with Tessa near the dock for photos. I smiled when she passed me. She smiled back without slowing down. By 11:40, I had refilled the ice chest twice, sliced tomatoes, carried platters outside, and found 3 serving spoons no one else could apparently locate. Being a reliable daughter is unpaid labor with sentimental branding. I went inside for lemonade and heard my mother's voice from the den. The door stood open 3 inches. "Take the new car," she whispered. "Your father and I want to see how you handle it on the highway." Tessa laughed softly. "Just don't tell everyone where the keys came from," my mother added. I continued to the kitchen. On the counter beside the lemonade pitcher lay an opened insurance envelope. New vehicle endorsement. Policyholder, Carol Witt. Vehicle, Mercedes E-Class. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need to. The truth was piling itself neatly. Noon sunlight settled over the yard. Plates filled. Beer opened. Chairs scraped. My father took his seat at the head of the long picnic table as if authority were furniture. Then Tessa tapped her wine glass with a butter knife. Ting. Ting. Conversation dimmed. She stood smiling in the bright white dress, sunlight caught in her hair, practiced innocence in her face. "I'd like to make a toast," she said. A few cousins raised drinks. "To my big sister." She turned toward me. "To the woman who always shows up broke, needy, and still hoping to matter." Laughter burst around the table. My mother laughed first. Then clapped. 3 sharp little applause notes. My father snorted into his beer. I remember strange things about that moment. A dragonfly hovering above the salt shaker, the smell of charcoal, a child asking for ketchup somewhere behind me. Trauma records in fragments. I set down my fork, stood up, lifted my water glass. I'd like to return the toast, I said. The yard fell still. I looked at Tessa. To the desperate one, I said calmly, who borrowed $18,000 from Mom and Dad's retirement in March and bought a Mercedes. Silence. Pure, ringing silence. Red wine spilled down the front of Tessa's white dress because her hand had tilted without her noticing. My mother's clapping hand froze halfway to her chest. My father slowly lowered his beer. 25 faces forgot how to swallow. I took a sip of warm water and sat back down. Then I ate my potato salad. Chaos doesn't always arrive screaming. Sometimes it arrives in whispers, pretending to be manners. That's enough. This is family business. She's joking. Bring out the cake. Aunt Marina, bless her practical soul, announced dessert like a fire chief ordering evacuation. I finished lunch. Then I walked to the dock. Marina joined me 90 seconds later, carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. We stared at the lake. It's begun, she said. Yes. You ready for the rest? I've been ready since November. She nodded. 6 weeks then. Phyllis would prepare the timeline. Marina would bring the trust amendment. I would bring everything else. They'll fight, I said. They'll fight you, Marina corrected. I'm scenery. You're the event. For the first time that day, I smiled. The family group chat had 217 members and a long history of recipes no one cooked. At 6:14 the next morning, Tessa posted. Family, yesterday, Sienna had some kind of meltdown. She's saying strange things about Mom's accounts. Please send love and prayers. I'm worried about her. 3 crying emojis. Prayer hands. Victimhood, properly punctuated. Calls started at 7. I ignored most of them. At 8:40, my mother called. No greeting. You owe your sister a public apology. No. You humiliated her. She humiliated herself. I just use numbers. Don't use that tone with me. I learned tone at home. She hung up. I made coffee. At 10 o'clock, 2 messages arrived. Uncle Phil, there's more to this. Call when ready. Aunt Marina, Tuesday. 8 p.m. Burlington. Bring the whole folder. I printed screenshots of the group chat and placed them on top. Public moves leave records. Tessa never understood that. Phyllis Crane's office sat in the back of a converted pharmacy in Burlington. She had managed books for our family for 23 years and trusted no one who said, circle back. At 8:03 p.m., she slid a timeline across the desk. 14 withdrawals over 18 months. Total, $86,400. Then a second page. Recent wire transfer, $15,000 to Graves End Holdings LLC, Albany, New York. What is that? I asked. Still tracing. Then she showed me something worse. A power of attorney amendment filed months after the original. Added language granting discretionary asset restructuring and consolidation authority. I never drafted this clause, Phyllis said. I copied both versions when I noticed. Forgery in legal clothing. I placed every page in the folder. The folder grew heavier. 2 days later, I drove to Albany. Graves End Holdings occupied one upstairs room over a bagel shop. The receptionist would not share details, but after I gave Tessa's married name, she paused too long before saying, there is an active account. Significant balance. In the parking lot, Phyllis called back. Debt consolidation portfolio. $217,000. 5-year repayment structure. Mercedes lease is linked separately. Tessa wasn't rich. She was drowning in expensive ways. And she had tied my parents to herself for flotation. My brother Caleb called from Portland that night. He hadn't been home for Memorial Day in 8 years. Tessa asked me to co-sign a $40,000 loan in February, he said. When I refused, she said she'd tell Mom I didn't care about family. He sent screenshots. Emotional blackmail in paragraph form. Come for Father's Day weekend, I said. There will be a meeting. I'll be there. Then something shifted. On Sunday night, my mother called with a voice I had never heard before. Small. I went to the bank, she said. They wouldn't show me the retirement balance. They said authorization is required. What does that mean? I closed my book. It means Tessa has been managing more than you knew. Kitchen sounds filled the line, fridge hum, spoon set down, breath catching. I trust her, my mother whispered. I know, I said. That's what she counted on. She hung up. But she had asked. In our family, asking was a revolution. The official family meeting was set for the following Saturday at 11. My mother called it to settle this nonsense. Translation: Tessa wanted me cornered before the paperwork arrived. Too late. By Tuesday night, Phyllis, Marina, Caleb, and I sat around my office conference table assembling folders. Folder 1, Withdrawals, Statements, Timeline. Folder 2, Forged Amendment, LLC Filings, Debt Accounts, and Lease Records. Folder 3, Screenshots, Group Chat Lies, Trust Succession Documents. Folder 4, For Tessa Alone. Counseling Options, Repayment Outline, and Legal Exposure Summary. Why give her one? Marina asked. Because consequences land harder when paired with a door, I said. Thursday at 4:07 a.m., my father called. My father never called. The bonds from the safe, he said, voice shaking. Your grandmother's Series I bonds. $10,400. Cashed last Tuesday. Signature looks like mine. Isn't. Tessa had accelerated. When thieves sense light, they grab faster. I'll be there Saturday early, I said. Don't tell Mom yet. Don't move anything. I sat awake in the dark afterward, listening to the clock tick like judgment. I arrived at the lake house at 9. Used my spare key. The house was not quiet. Movement in the den. Safe door open. Tessa knelt on the rug beside a box labeled Mom's papers. Envelopes spread around her like feathers from something killed. She looked up fast. What are you doing here? I'll handle this, I said. I closed the safe. Set the box aside. Reached into my tote. Placed folder 4 on the desk. Read it before they arrive. She stared at it. You have 2 hours. Then I made coffee and sat on the porch listening to the unmistakable sound of a manila folder being opened. She used to call my quiet weakness. That morning, it was the loudest thing in the house. By 10:50, everyone had arrived. Caleb hugged me without words. Marina and Phyllis came together. My mother carried bakery croissants she hadn't made. My father sat gray-faced at the head of the table. Bread arrived separately, confused. I laid the 3 folders down the center of the dining table. This is what you've been saying I shouldn't see, I told Tessa. Now I'm asking them to look. My father opened folder 1. He read slowly. Finger against the page. My mother read over his shoulder, then grabbed her own copy. Her face drained color at line 2. These are your statements, Carol, Phyllis said evenly. Every entry verified. Tessa inhaled sharply. Mom, she's jealous. She always has been. My father did not look up. Where's the Mercedes? He asked. No answer. Where's the money? Tessa stood. I'm not doing this. She headed for the porch. Marina intercepted her at the screen door. You are leaving? Tessa snapped. No, Marina said softly. You are not. We solve this as a family or without one. There is no third option. 20 seconds of stillness. Then Tessa turned around and sat beside Brett instead of at the head. Even she knew crowns had shifted. Folder 2 broke the rest open. Debt accounts. LLC, lease records. Consolidation structures. Forged language. Missing bonds. You used our retirement to pay your credit cards, my father said. Tessa began to cry. Real crying this time. Messy, shocked, childlike. I was going to pay it back. With what? Caleb asked quietly. Brett stood, walked into the kitchen, and ran water over his hands for a very long time. Some men wash when they cannot speak. Then my mother lifted her head. Looked at Tessa. I clapped, she said. No one moved. At the picnic. While you insulted your sister. Tessa flinched. I am ashamed of myself, my mother said. For that day. For 20 years before it. Then she turned to me and placed one hand over mine. It was the first apology my mother had ever offered me without defending herself first. I let it stay for one breath. Then I moved gently away. There was still work to do. I placed the original power of attorney beside the forged amendment. Pointed to the inserted paragraph. My mother read it twice. I never signed this. No, I said. You didn't. Phyllis slid revocation papers from her bag. Recovery now requires repayment or civil action. My father looked at Tessa as if seeing weather damage inside a house he built himself. I read the handwritten plan I'd prepared. Revoke authority immediately. Phyllis assumes temporary stewardship. Tessa enters counseling for financial abuse and compulsive debt behavior. Formal repayment plan within 30 days. No direct financial contact between Tessa and me for 12 months. Personal contact later only if mutual. My mother signed first. Her hand was steady. My father signed second. Tessa stared at me through swollen eyes. I don't know how to be your sister anymore, she whispered. Neither do I said. But I'm not your enemy. I'm also not your bank. Get well. Then we'll see what remains. I packed the originals into an accordion file, stepped outside, and walked alone to the dock. Marina joined me a minute later. We watched sunlight move across the lake. No speeches. No hugs. No cinematic healing. Just air. Sometimes peace enters quietly because chaos finally got tired. 6 weeks later, I painted my office walls a color called First Frost. Off-white with a hint of green. Calm, pretending to be neutral. My mother began calling me in 4-minute conversations. Insurance questions. Gutter cleaner opinions. Lawn concerns. We were not doing therapy. We were doing beginnings. My father started coming by on Wednesdays for coffee. Sometimes he spoke about birds he'd seen driving in. Sometimes contracts. Once he asked what paint I used. That was his version of saying he liked the room. Caleb called every Sunday. We talked tomatoes, bicycles, weather. Healing often enters disguised as boring conversation. Tessa did not call. Phyllis informed me quietly that Tessa was attending counseling. She made the first repayment. Then another. Brett filed for separation. Payne had finally sent invoices. I did not chase updates. That road was hers. At the end of July, Aunt Marina brought me a framed photograph of my grandmother laughing on the lake dock sometime in the early 70s. I set it on my desk. In late August, I drove alone to the lake house while my parents were out to dinner. I still had a key. Some permissions survive conflict. I carried one chair to the dock. One glass. One bottle of white wine I'd been saving since Christmas. And a clean white napkin. I poured a single glass and watched the sun lower itself into gold. The lake in August is darker than in May. Wiser too. I thought about the words I had spoken at the picnic. To the desperate one. But the truth was more tender than anger had allowed that day. Tessa had not been desperate. She had been drowning. And once I named it honestly, no one could pretend anymore that there hadn't been ropes nearby for years. Including the one I had held alone so long my hands forgot they could open. I used to think family was a circle that included you whether you fit or not. Now I think family is a table. You choose who sits there. You notice who brings nourishment. You stop mistaking appetite for love. My table is smaller now. It is also steadier. The sky darkened one shade deeper. I lifted my glass. Took one slow swallow. Set it down on the white napkin. And for the first time in my adult life, the silence around me felt like something kind.